here again talking to Elie Godsi. It's about a year or so since I last spoke to you, Elie, and really what we're looking to do is catch up and find out what you've been doing this season and how successful, hopefully, Quest Baits have been for you.
Well, you know, I've had a really busy year. I've moved house, work's been really busy, so fishing time has been a little bit limited. I've had quite a number of relatively short sessions for me. I've been using Quest Baits since field testing days, so I'm completely sold on the range. Special crab and fruity trifle, the ones that I use most. And despite the fact that I've literally only been out a handful of times this year, fishing syndicates over here, I've still managed a few 30s, including my first UK 30 plus common, which I've been waiting years and years to actually bank that fish, 32 pound 4 ounce PB common. So I was really pleased with that.
Excellent.
And a couple of other 30s, and then I've been to France a couple of times with angling lines, as you know. Just a few weeks ago, came back from La Russie, and I had a 47 from La Russie on a really hard week. So really, I just wanted to kind of talk about the best, the highlights of the year, really. As I say, it's been a year when I've not fished a lot, but I've had good success when I have been out. The 32 pound common was on the Gloucestershire syndicate that I fish. It's a really heavily weedy water. I know a lot of people are put off by fishing very thick beds of weed. This is sort of 18 inches, 2.5, 3 foot of silkweed all over the bottom. And for a long time, many years, I've been really scared about using a marker float heavily. I've always wanted to just put the marker float in a couple of times, find a spot. And I've really kind of revised my thinking about that this year and realised that even if it takes me an hour and a half to find the right spot in a weedy area, I'd rather find the right spot, because I know if I can find the right area to fish a bait in, then I've got a much better chance. And I've had results. I mean, I got to the late on a Wednesday afternoon, late afternoon. It was July, so I had a few hours of daylight still to go. Did my usual tactic of using the maximum action pellets. Ask Sean, I'm always asking for mixes of pellets. I really like mixing the crab and the raja together. Experiment, just do things slightly differently. So I'm using my pellets. I was using the chod rig quite a lot this year. Spent a long time, I literally spent about an hour and a half trying to find a spot with the marker float. Really struggling, thinking, this is going to be, I've got to try and find 3 different spots to put my rigs in. Eventually found a spot, and once I found an area with a marker float, then here's a tip that hopefully people will find useful, is I always carry an old blunt rig, one that you've used, you're going to throw away. I always carry 2 or 3 of those around. Once I found the spot with the marker float, I then cast the rig out with this old blunt hook and feel the area as if I was going to put a bait on there. And I found this spot and I pulled back with the rig, and it came back smooth as glass. Now bear in mind, everywhere else is really thick, locked up weed. This was just smooth for about 2 or 3 feet. And I thought, fantastic. After about an hour and a half, I finally found what I was looking for. Put the chod rig out, marked it up with the elastic. I couldn't have been fishing more than about 3.5 hours. About 11:30 that night, the spot that I knew was going to go roared off, and I had an animal fight with this fish. It took me for a run around for about 25 minutes. Bear in mind, the fish in this lake go to high 30s. I didn't know what I had on. There's a few commons in there, but I really didn't think it was going to be one of the commons, and it was a 32 pound common. And I was absolutely cock-a-hoop. Put it back in the water, and it had fought so hard it sulked in the margins for about an hour and a half like a barbel before it swam off. So it's midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I've got everything marked up, far line, skyline. I've got the elastic on the rod, on the line. I cast right back to the same spot. I'm thinking, oh great, I've found a magic spot. This is going to go again. Nothing all night. Couldn't believe it. Next day, time to recheck all my rigs, and I pull back the same spot, same rig, and it was covered in weed. I'm thinking, what is going on here? Spent another 25 minutes casting all around the area I'd had the fish, thick with weed, absolutely chock-a-block with weed, and the whole spot had gone. That spot that I'd had the takeoff had gone, and I can only assume that the fish feeding, moving in, ripping up the bottom had moved the silkweed, so I'd had this tiny window of opportunity for a few hours, this weed-free area, got the take, and it was gone. And there was no way I could find that spot again, and I had to then spend another hour trying to find other areas.
The other day we were actually at a show at Sandown, and I heard Sean actually in discussion with somebody who'd asked him this question, and he was saying that because the weed actually follows the sun, it is possible that a clear spot is there at one point in the day, but it isn't there at the other point of the day, so maybe it could be that.
I must say I hadn't thought of that before. It just goes to show how important it is to check and recast and make sure that you're fishing into what you think you're fishing in.
Once you've got your fish on and you've got the take, how do you cope with getting it in through the weed? Was that difficult?
No, I think it's something to do with the nature of the chod rig. Because you're fishing very light leads, literally only, it's another thing that's important. I think people think with all the hype that's been around about the chod rig that you can just cast it out onto anything. You still have to find your spots. There's no point finding casting a bait into 2.5 foot of silkweed. It's just not going to work. But because you're only using an ounce and a half lead, I think it confuses the fish, and they come up quite quickly. And this fish came to the surface and then started to bore down. So a couple of times it tried to go into the weed, but never really kind of weeded itself up. And I think that is partly a product of the way the rig works. So it didn't weed me up. It just took me on a complete runaround. There's nothing I could do with it for 15 minutes. And I've had a lot of hook pulls over the years on this water. The chod rig seems to have solved that problem. But of course, the whole time you're sort of, oh, please don't come off, please don't come off. And the longer the fight goes on, the more you're thinking, oh no, I start getting a little bit nervous the longer the fight goes on. I should be the other way around, but I've lost a number of fish on there, which I've had on for quite a long time. But it didn't weed me up, and I was really pleased to catch that fish. It's been a long time in coming.
Great.